Welcome to the Feast Life, where we empower you, the modern homeschool mom, to create a life and homeschool you love, one founded on faith, family, freedom, and fun. I'm your host, Julie Ross, creator of the award-winning homeschool curriculum, A Gentle Feast, and a certified Christian life coach. For more information on today's episode and to access my free gift for you, check out thefeastlife.me. Charlotte Mason once said, "Life should be all living, not a mere tedious passing of time." So on this show, we seek to savor the feast of life. Girl, grab your favorite beverage and pull up a chair. You are welcome at this table. Hey, and welcome to Charlotte Mason and You. I will be showing you the difference between a traditional style of education and a Charlotte Mason approach. We'll be diving into what some of the foundational principles of this philosophy are all about, and I try to make it real simple. So grab a notebook, grab your favorite beverage, and join me as we dive into this live masterclass that I did all about Charlotte Mason. All right, welcome to Charlotte Mason 101. So in today's class, I'm going to be giving kind of an overview of Charlotte Mason's philosophy, what it is not, and answering the question I get all the time, will this be a good fit for my family? So let me share my slides with you so that we can get started. All right. So if you're not familiar with me, my name is Julie Ross, and I'm the creator of the Charlotte Mason homeschool curriculum, A Gentle Feast. I'm also a mom to 5 kiddos. My oldest is 22 and just graduated from the University of South Carolina in May. She actually has a graphic design degree and is helping me with A Gentle Feast. So that's really fun to work with her. She also helped edit my podcast, but I just started my own new podcast, and I'll talk about that at the end of today. So it's really fun to get to work with your kid again. It's kind of like homeschooling, but like on a whole new level. And then I also have a daughter who's 20, who is a pre-med student at the University of South Carolina as well. And then I have 3 teenagers that I'm homeschooling, 15, 14, and 13. So I've been homeschooling for almost 20 years now, so a long time. And I'm also a certified Christian life coach. So I do offer coaching programs and classes for homeschool moms as well. So even if you're like, I don't know if I really want to jump into the Charlotte Mason pool or drink the Charlotte Mason Kool-Aid, as I like to say, I still offer coaching for any philosophy or any kind of homeschooling you're doing too. So that might be something you want to consider as well. So there's my 5 lovely children. So when I first started homeschooling, I was a public school teacher, and then I taught at a private Christian school. And so when I first started homeschooling, I did what I was used to, which was school. So we had a workbook for every subject, and we even said the pledge, y'all. Like, we started our day off with circle time, and I had everything scheduled out in 15-minute little increments all day long. Needless to say, within about a year or 2, I was completely burnt out and wanted to quit homeschooling. I also had 3 kids under the age of 3, so that might have had something to do with it, but I was constantly trying to figure out what wasn't working, how can I fix this, staying up till wee hours of the morning on Pinterest, trying to print out things that sounded fun, things that would be different. And so I was constantly like reinventing the wheel. I mean, my poor 2 older girls, but they worked through it. This was very early on, but I was always like, oh, let's try this fun thing or this fun thing. And there was no consistency to our days, which made it very hard to actually do any school. And after I was like about ready to throw in the towel, I decided to jump into Charlotte Mason's philosophy. I had heard about it before. Actually, back when I was a public school teacher, I read, hold on, it's on my shelf right here, because I love this book so much. I read For the Children's Sake by Susan Schaefer Macaulay. This is like the gateway to Charlotte Mason. So if you are, after this class, if you want to learn more, this is the book. So when I was a public school teacher, I found this book at my church's library. And I literally stayed up till like 3 a.m. reading this book and weeping. Susan Schaefer Macaulay's children went to a Charlotte Mason school in England, and she describes the kind of education her children have, plus incorporates a lot of Charlotte Mason's principles. And it was such a beautiful picture of what education could be. And I knew I couldn't give that to the kids in my public school class, and it broke my heart. And so that's actually one of the reasons I left teaching public school. So this book made a huge impact on my life. And so I knew my heart was drawn to the style of education. I just didn't know how to actually do it. And so, back then we're like the homeschool dark ages where we had like Yahoo groups and stuff. So if you wanted to like figure something out, like the internet, was still very, very fresh. You had to do a lot of things yourself and a lot of digging. And so that's when I was like, you know what, I'm going to read what Charlotte Mason had to say for herself. So, she has a lot to say for herself. So these are her 6 volumes of education. So not light reading at all. And started incorporating more and more and more into what I was doing in my homeschool. Of course, like I said, there wasn't a lot of help or support back then. So I really had to learn things kind of the hard way and try something and fail and try something else and figure out kind of along the way, stumbling. And so once I really got my groove, I started taking and writing down what I was doing with my own kids, and a gentle feast grew out of that. And for the past 8 years, I've been running that and helping families all over the world incorporate this philosophy into their home. And I'm so passionate about it because I have seen what a difference it has made in my family's life, not just in our homeschool and in my kids' education, but in my life and how much it has changed me as a person. So I have made it my mission to help other moms with tools and resources to help them along the path so they don't have to stumble and fall and make all the mistakes and things that I did. Let's talk about Charlotte Mason for a second. Okay, so like, who is this lady? I remember when I started reading her volumes and incorporating more of her principles into my homeschool, I was telling one of my friends about it, and she said, Charlotte Mason, yeah, I've heard of her. Isn't she like some sort of hippie? So yeah, as you can tell by the picture, Charlotte Mason was not a hippie. In fact, she lived in Victorian England by the fancy cute dress she has on. So she lived in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and such a brilliant and incredible woman. So she was orphaned at the age of 16. She went to college to become a teacher. She did teach in schools, which were very different in England back in Victorian times than they are today, and learned so much from her teaching and observing of children, and just such a brilliant person, just so well read. If you read her volumes, she quotes ancient philosophers and ancient educational philosophies and medieval thinking, and just her understanding was a remarkable thing. And her church was doing a fundraiser. And as part of that, she decided to give a series of lectures on what she had developed as her own educational philosophy through her reading, through her studies, through her working with children. These lectures got published into the first volume that we have today, Home Education. And because it was so groundbreaking, her philosophy, it was really revolutionary. People were writing to her, how do we do this? How do we do this in our homes? How do we make schools that follow this approach? And so she developed a Parents Education Union, the PNEU, and they started giving more lectures and teaching more educators and governesses and parents on how to put these principles into practice in real life. She eventually started a teachers college in Ambleside, the House of Education, where she trained governesses to go into people's homes and educate them this way. Her belief really was that home was the best place for children to learn. So there are a lot of educational philosophies out there, from Aristotle to John Dewey in our modern education system, but none of them have been primarily for homeschool. And so Charlotte Mason, her first book was Home Education. She really did believe that home was one of the best places for children to learn. So she trained governesses. I mean, can we bring those back? Anybody else? Just saying. I'd be all about that. Okay. I'd be like, yes, can I pay you to come and teach my, no, I'm kidding. As people started to see the value of what she was teaching, parents that couldn't afford a governess, or parents that were across the world in the British Empire, started writing to her and saying, can we get some of this that you're doing? We want to do this in our own homes. And so they developed programs where they would send out booklets to these parents and pamphlets that would teach them this educational philosophy. And parents would send their exams back to Charlotte Mason. Charlotte Mason would actually read all the kids' exams and write on them. Could you imagine that? I mean, I don't know. Part of me is like, I don't know if I would have wanted Charlotte Mason to read my kids' exams, but just her heart for this was truly, truly remarkable, that she would take the time to write all those things out by hand. In the 1980s, the Andriolas went over to England. They were missionaries over there, and Karen Andriola got introduced to Charlotte Mason's writings. And she brought those back to the United States and published them here. And in the United States, in the homeschool movement, ever since then, Charlotte Mason has grown and grown and grown and grown in popularity. Even since, like I said, when I started, there was hardly any resources other than her original writings. And now there's a ton. People really have seen the value of this in the past 100+ years since she started writing. And it has been all across the world. Hundreds and hundreds of students have gone through education following her approach. So what is her approach? Well, I'm so glad you asked, because that's what I want to talk about. All right, so what are some of the foundational principles of Charlotte Mason? Like I said, she had a lot to say. So we could go like super deep. We're not doing that right now. Okay, we are just doing a little overview of some of these foundational things. So if you've been in the Charlotte Mason world and Charlotte Mason circles, you probably have heard some of these kind of things before. All right, so number one, living books. So what's a living book? It's not talking to me. It's alive. No, a living book is one that is full of life because it's full of ideas. Ideas grow in our children's minds. A living book is usually told in a narrative fashion. It's usually written by one author who's passionate about the subject, and it brings the subject to life in our children's minds. So what are the benefits of this? Well, if I have to bring the subject to life for my children, that puts the work on me. Instead, I'm putting my children in touch with a living book. They're getting the life. They're coming to the words and the ideas for themselves. It's also vastly different than a textbook. So I could tell you all the differences, but I would rather show you because that's how I work. So we're going to do a little history lesson. And some of you have been around me before may have heard this, but it's really cool to go through it and hear it again. So just buckle up here.
Today's episode is brought to you by the Confident Homeschool Mom. Are you tired of just trying to survive to the end of the day? Overwhelmed juggling the demands of homeschooling and family life? Want to create a life and homeschool you actually love? Let me show you how. The Confident Homeschool Mom is a unique program that combines homeschooling wisdom and life coaching tools to help you break free from the negative patterns that are keeping you stuck. Currently, the doors to the Confident Homeschool Mom are now open. So if you are listening to this episode before February 4th, 2004, make sure you head on over and check it out. Go to thefeastlife.me/join to check out the Confident Homeschool Mom course. I hope to see you inside.
Okay, so I'm going to read to you from a traditional 5th grade history textbook, which is the subject I taught when I taught public school. So this is actually the book I used. And we're going to learn about this guy. So he has a cool hairdo, right? All right, everybody know who that is? Andrew Jackson. Okay. So I really want you to listen to this. I really want you to experience this, not just as an adult, but if you were a child listening to these, what you would get. All right, so today, class, we are going to learn about Andrew Jackson. America in the early 1800s was changing fast. In the North, workshops run by the craftspeople who owned them were being replaced by large-scale factories owned by business people and staffed by hired workers. In the South, small family farms began to give way to large cotton plantations, owned by the wealthy white people and worked by enslaved African Americans. Wealth seemed to be concentrated into a few hands. Many ordinary Americans felt left behind. These same people also began to believe they were losing power in their government. By the late 1700s, some Americans thought the government was best managed by wealthy property-owning men. Government policies seemed targeted to help build the power of these people. The result was a growing belief that the wealthy were tightening their grip on power in the United States. Hoping for a change, small farmers, frontier settlers, and slaveholders rallied behind reform-minded Andrew Jackson, the popular hero of the War of 1812 and the presidential candidate in the 1824 election. They believed Jackson would defend the rights of the common people. They had been bitterly disappointed by the way he lost in the 1824 election by a decision of the House of Representatives. During the time of Jackson's popularity, a number of democratic reforms were made. Many states changed their qualifications for voters. They lowered or even eliminated the requirement that men own a certain amount of property in order to vote or hold office. Political parties began holding public nominating conventions, where party members chose the party's candidates. Previously, candidates were selected by party leaders. This increase of voting rights by lowering property requirements later became known as Jacksonian democracy. Jackson supporters were determined that their candidate would win the 1828 election. The Democratic Party arose from the supporters of Jackson. Many people who backed President Adams began calling themselves National Republicans. The 1828 presidential contest was a rematch of the 1824 election. Once again, John Quincy Adams faced Andrew Jackson. Jackson chose Senator John C. Calhoun as his running mate. Jackson's supporters saw his victory as a win for the common people. A crowd cheered outside the Capitol as he took his oath of office. The massive crowd followed Jackson to a huge party on the White House lawn. The few police officers on hand had difficulty containing the partygoers. As president, Jackson rewarded some of his supporters with government jobs. This spoils system, the practice of giving government jobs to political backers, comes from the saying, "To the victor belongs the spoils." Secretary of State Martin Van Buren was one of Jackson's strongest allies in his official cabinet. President Jackson also relied a great deal on his kitchen cabinet, an informal group of trusted advisors who sometimes met in the White House kitchen. All right, I would like to hear from you. What was going through your mind as I was reading that? Melissa said, I wouldn't be able to teach this back. It was just so many facts strung together. Snore. So many dates. Boring. Make it stop. Yes. I love that one. I see the difference. I'm already losing interest. Yes. A ton of facts. My eyelids were drooping. Blah, blah, blah. Yes, right? I kind of felt like the teacher in Ferris Bueller Day Off, where you're just like, anyone? Some interesting things, but too surfacey. Good. Okay. In a typical classroom, then after you read something, you answer questions about it. I learned the really brilliant idea when I was in school that if you read the questions first, then you don't actually have to read the whole entire chapter. You can just skim and look for the bold words and answer the questions. Did anybody else figure that out when you were in school? Yes, all smart people here. Yes, that's right. So we don't even actually have to read, because the whole point here is just to get some answers right and move on to what I actually want to do or learn about, right? Okay, so we're going to take a little assessment. So if you have a piece of paper, get it out, or you can just use the notes app on your phone. But I want you to write down the answers to these questions. And these are the actual questions that are in the back of the chapter, right? President Jackson's group of advisors was known as the blank because of where it met in the White House. So yes, just keep these answers to yourself. Okay. Blank served as Andrew Jackson's vice president. The practice of rewarding supporters with positions in government is known as the blank. All right. What political party was formed from Jackson's supporters? All right, and here's the last one. The voting rights were expanded by eliminating what requirement? All right, let's see how you did. You have a red pen? Okay. President Jackson's group of advisors was known as the kitchen cabinet. John C. Calhoun was Andrew Jackson's vice president. The practice of rewarding supporters with positions in government is known as the spoils system. I failed. It's okay, girl. What political party was formed from Jackson's supporters? That's the next question, right? That was the Democratic Party. And then the last one, voting rights were expanded by eliminating the requirement to own property. All right, so 2 out of 5. It's all woohoo, gold stars. All right, so what were your thoughts when you were doing the quiz or the recall questions? It'd be much easier if you could go back and read it, right? You probably would have got 5 out of 5. You could go back and find all the answers. But just out of the top of your head, yeah, it's a little harder. got the first one that dozed off. Anyone feel a little stressed when you were trying to remember the answers? Do we have any, like, I was in school, like type A kids who like didn't want to get anything wrong and felt a little pressure? That's how I would have felt when I was in school. Yes, it was hard to remember all those facts. It was really hard to remember all those facts. I was actually reading it to you and I forgot what the answer to one of the questions was. So there you go. Okay. Yeah. Very easy to get distracted. I was thinking about what I was going to have for dinner tonight. So Sabrina said, yes, it makes me not interested in wanting to learn history. Yes. And that is true. That is, that was always my favorite subject growing up. And I would always just try to like get by in school and get it over with and then go read a historical fiction or something I actually wanted to read to learn history. Carmen said, I learned to retain info long enough to pass the test. Yes, it's confession time. Anyone else? I just need to learn this and I can pass the test and then I can forget it. Yes, we do what we have to do, right? We knew we had to get the grade and keep moving on. So what do I got to do to memorize this stuff and get going? All right, so now I'm going to read to you from a living book. So remember, a living book is full of ideas. It's usually told in a narrative fashion. It's usually written by one author who's passionate about the subject. So again, this is a story about Andrew Jackson. This comes from a book called America First by Lawton B. Evan. I don't recommend the entire book at all, and it needs some editing for sure. There is an updated version of it, but this particular story about Andrew Jackson, I really liked. Andrew Jackson is one of the most picturesque characters in American history. He was born of Scotch-Irish parents on the borderline between North and South Carolina. His father died about the time he was born, and his mother had to support her 3 boys by spinning flax. Jackson grew up to be a tall, slender lad with red hair and a freckled face. He was very wild, quick-tempered, and mischievous. He had many quarrels with his companions and many fights. But at home, he was devoted to his mother and showed kindness to the horses and other animals on the farm. He was a fearless rider and all his life owned fine horses. When Jackson was 14 years of age, the revolution was still in progress. The British Army had swept through the neighborhood of his home, and the boy had seen his relatives and neighbors suffering and dying. The local church was used as a hospital, and Jackson's mother often went there to nurse the sick and wounded. Andrew and his brother Robert ran errands for her and were in and out of the church so often they soon became familiar with the horrors of war. At one time, Andrew and his brother were taken prisoner by the British and were confined in the house of their own cousin. The English officers had everything they wished, and one of them ordered Jackson to clean his muddy boots. Jackson replied, I'm a prisoner of war, not your servant. You can clean them yourself. This enraged the British officer to such an extent that he struck at the boy with his sword, wounding him on his head and hand. Jackson carried the scars with him all of his life. Robert also received rough treatment from the officers. The boys were carried 40 miles away to a prison camp and not allowed much food or water. There, smallpox broke out, and both boys were quite sick with it. Their mother secured the release, but Robert, suffering from wounds and fever, died 2 days after he reached home, and Andrew was ill for many weeks. Before he was quite well, his mother also died. At 17 years of age, he began to study law. When he was 21, he moved to Tennessee and became a prominent lawyer in that new and wild country. In his efforts to preserve law and order among the frontiersmen and adventurers of that section, he had many personal difficulties. He was hot-tempered and a good shot, and frontier life was rough. One day, when he was at a public dinner, some of his friends began to quarrel at the other side of the table from where Jackson was sitting. He immediately sprang upon the table and strode along it, scattering the dishes and glasses as he went. Thrusting his hand behind him, he clicked his snuff box. Thinking he was about to draw a pistol, the guest ran in haste, crying, "Don't shoot, Mr. Jackson, don't shoot!" During the War of 1812, Jackson did great service as a soldier. He fought against the natives in the South and was prominent at the Battle of New Orleans. Once, during the campaign, some soldiers grew mutinous because food was scarce and they threatened to leave. Jackson, with his arm in a sling, rode up to them and, taking his pistol in his free hand, said, "By the Eternal, I will shoot the first man who moves." The soldiers knew he would do it, and there was no further trouble. His endurance during this campaign earned him the name of Old Hickory, because he was so tough, and because though he would often bend, he would not break. In appearance, he was tall, erect, and spare, with dark blue eyes and heavy eyebrows. All through his life, his temper was fiery and easily aroused when he was opposed. He became president of the United States when he was past 60 years of age. He was always a plain man of the people who hated his enemies and wanted them punished, and who loved his friends and wanted them rewarded. He was a strong-minded president who had his own way without asking advice. Even to this day, he's regarded as among the notable men who have held this high position. All right, so what was going through your head when I was reading that? Carissa said her kids read this encyclopedia and they love it. Yes. Okay, so you've already heard this. Yes. Much more pleasant. Relatable. Yeah, for sure. Story driven. Mariana, great point, right? You can picture that in your head, right? You can see what Andrew Jackson looked like, right? I cared. I wanted to learn more. Exactly. This was super interesting. I'd like to learn if it was from something like this. Absolutely. You could see him doing all those actions. Yep. It's so much more interesting and descriptive. You could picture it. Definitely interesting. You feel like you know him rather than facts like a timeline. That is so true, Krista. So true. All right. So what Charlotte Mason would do after you finish reading from a living book is she would have you narrate, which is really just telling. I would love if anyone is feeling super brave and would like to tell us about it. Anyone? That brave? I know that's asking a lot. Okay, so why don't we just narrate on paper? So as your kids get older, they will do written narrations. So pull out a piece of paper, and I'm going to give you a minute. And I really want you to try this because once you experience this, it's so cool. So if you're checking emails or like, on Instagram or something like that, come back to me. And I want you to get out a piece of paper in your notes app. Write down what you remember from the story about Andrew Jackson. All right. So what were your thoughts on telling me about the story? What was it like for you? Oh, Laura, I love what you just said. This is hard. I jumped into Charlotte Mason this year and have more compassion for my 13-year-old boy who hates narrating. Yes, it is hard, especially at first. It is a muscle. It does get easier, but at first it is very hard. Recall questions, especially when you can go back and look for the answers, are much easier. It's so much easier to remember when it's told through a narrative format. Absolutely. Did anyone feel stressed or pressured, like, oh no, I got to get the right answer? Patricia's shaking your head no. Okay. I love this. Andrew Jackson grew up during the Civil War. He had firsthand experience with the horrors of war. Yeah. The Revolutionary War. He grew up during the Revolutionary War. That's right. Yeah. Oh, someone wrote their whole narration. That's awesome. Yeah, it's just much more enjoyable. You can remember, you can picture it in your head, what happened. You had a deeper appreciation for him as a more appreciation for your kids for their narrations. Yes. And Charlotte Mason even said that, she said, go read Austen or Dickens before you go to bed at night. And in the morning, try to narrate it. and see how hard it is. Or like I tell people, try to read Charlotte Mason's volumes and then tell someone what you read. It's much higher level thinking skills, and we're going to dive deeper into that here in a second. But let's just close the book here on the Andrew Jackson story. Yeah, so I saw so much of you say that you were able to picture it in your head. You could relate to him, right? You had compassion for him. And I think that's what's so beautiful about reading a living book. You can feel like you could put yourself in the shoes of that person and really, when I read it with my kids, I felt so bad for him. Like he lost his brother and his mom and like had to do all these things with the soldiers. But what's really cool is seeing your kids narrate and their unique personalities that come out. So when I read this story to my kids, my girls were like, oh my goodness, all those soldiers were sick and the poor mom died, and they were just all about the family and what was happening. And then my son had to go run and get his wooden sword and act out the scene where the soldier was like, clean my muddy boots. No, I won't. And then he actually got up on the dining room table and started prancing along the table, kicking everything off the table to act out the scene in the restaurant. So that's his personality. It's very dramatic. He focused on the story of what was meaningful to him. So it's not so much, here's the right answer. What's the fact from today? Charlotte Mason said that kids are going to take what they need. They're eclectic. Just like at a Thanksgiving feast, you might not want the Brussels sprouts, but you might want 2 helpings of mashed potatoes. We all take what we need from different situations. Now, I hear from people, but they do need to know at some point that he ran against John Adams or that property requirements were eliminated in the 1824 election. Okay. So it's not that they don't ever get facts. So in high school, the social studies textbook, it is still living. It's still taught in narrative faction, but it does include some more of this information. But the key being, because they have these living seeds in their minds, when they do learn the facts, they actually have something to relate them to. Now I can understand Andrew Jackson, why the common people thought he was a person like them. Because I remember when I heard this story back when I was a kid about what his life was like, he was a common person. They have much more compassion for him. Your kids would kick things off the table. Lori, thank you so much for writing out your narration. You did absolutely fabulous. Melissa, my mother was a widow, so it struck me absolutely. That's one of the things I love when you read living books. Like you connect your own stories to their stories. And what happens in our minds when we make these connections amongst stories is that makes the neural pathway even deeper and more meaningful in our minds, which is so cool for our kids to be able to make these connections. All right. So that kind of gives you an idea of why Charlotte Mason includes living books instead of textbooks. It's not that, again, as they get older, there's much more meat into these textbooks. I think someone said something here about science. Yes, Samantha said, my 14-year-old has been doing Charlotte Mason for the past year. He tried to take a science test from his high school biology textbooks using their study guide and fill in the blank. He said, Mom, I didn't learn anything from this. Can I go back to narrating? Wow, that is amazing, Samantha. Yes, and there's even high school physics books that are written in a living fashion. Okay, the book that I use is called For the Love of Physics. I thought this was a joke because I didn't think anybody could actually love physics. Because when I was in school, I wanted to poke my eye out with a pencil during physics. And it's written by a physicist. So obviously he really loves physics because this is what he does for his whole life. And that passion comes through. And it's told in a narrative fashion about the things that you use every day and all the physics behind them. I actually understood physics for the first time. I wasn't just memorizing math formulas and plugging numbers in. I was actually understanding the concepts because they were explained in a way that like, oh, that's why the shower works that way. Oh, that makes sense. Like I actually could see it in my own head and it made so much more sense. Heather said, I really appreciate hearing the difference in the 2 styles and then doing narration. Yeah, I think it's so important for parents to do this stuff because if you're not familiar with Charlotte Mason, you might not be doing it, but those of us who are, like someone else said, like you appreciate how hard it is, the mental work it takes to take in living ideas and then to tell someone back about them.
All right. I hope today's class gave you a better picture of what it would be like to be a student and learn from this approach. If you're anything like me, you had a very traditional school setting where you had that kind of dry facts textbook, and then you had to do some sort of recall assessment after that, as opposed to the living and beautiful approach that Charlotte Mason said we all need for our minds to grow. And that is upon feasting living ideas that we find in living books like the one I read to you today.
and then simply narrating, talking back, telling what we learned in our own word. It is such a powerful practice. And I'm so glad you got to experience it as a student today.
Hey there, Julie Ross here. I just wanted to say thank you for listening to today's episode. If you like this show, it would mean the world to me if you would leave a positive review in iTunes. This really does help people learn about the podcast. And each month I will pick a winner to receive a free gift. Don't forget to check out all the free resources we created for you at thefeastlife.me. Thank you.